was unmuted that whole time. That's pretty funny. Well, now I'll click here. Hello, everybody, and welcome to, I think we're episode 18. Welcome to the 18th episode of the PureJoy podcast. I'm your host, M, and this is a bi-weekly exploration into what brings people joy. Today, I have with me my guest, Tristen Farley. Some of you may know him as Crin Crea on many of the social networks, the YouTube, the Twitch, Twitter, all of the sort of social strata. And he is here today to tell us about his joys. So I'll probably be bouncing back and forth the whole episode, Tristen, Crin. But why don't you introduce yourself to us here? Tell us who we're talking to today on the podcast.
Hello, everybody. My name is Crin. That is what I generally go by online. Most of my IRL friends do know me as Tristen. That's what I've gone by my entire life. But Crin is actually one of those things that does come from joy. You see, way back when I started DMing, I started my long journey through D&D and Star Wars and all these other tabletop RPGs, Crin Crea was actually the first NPC I ever made.
Oh.
It was this Felucian scout that I made for the Star Wars game I was running. So that's where that name comes from, and it's a name that it means a lot to me. And so that's where it's from, and goes into my 20-year journey through tabletop RPGs and my obsession with Star Wars, thanks to Knights of the Old Republic games, and the John Williams music is another thing I absolutely adore. I'm very big on instrumentals and that sort of background music that you can get in. Shout out to Saints Riot for getting me into Katana Zero, because that is a soundtrack that I have been listening to nonstop for the last 3 years since he started putting those in his video. I'm all over the place, but in the end, I'm a giant nerd. I'm a giant geek. I love so much about what culture has brought to us through storytelling and through the different mediums that has come. You can see in the background, we got Star Wars, we got goblins and Nintendo stuff. There's Bloodborne art back there. Excuse me, just turning for a second. This Mad Max poster on the side here has been it was one of my first big purchases as an adult. Storytelling is so important to me, and that's why I went to school for acting and why I still want to be a voice actor and writer today.
Wow. So just sort of a shrine to sort of nerddom in your room. That's fantastic.
All the stuff I love.
Yeah, no, my camera has just never faced. I keep setting up all of my little Pokemon Lego sets, my stacks of cards, and then the camera is just never facing in that direction, and I get lights in wall. So I make lights in wall work, but they're here, just off to the right instead of the left.
It's also my working library is right behind me, so this is my D&D and Pathfinder collection right here. That's all the books there. So yeah. It's practical as well.
Sure.
That brings me joy.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, that's really cool. I think I had known that it was part of a tabletop role-playing game. At some point, I think you had shared a little tidbit, but that's really cool that it's the name we know you by already. It's your joy here on the podcast. It's just a really cool through line. But before we get into that, before we get into the pure joy of your life, we like to start with a little question, a little bit, and that is, what today has brought you joy? You look back on it just this morning. Where have you found joy just today?
Just today. Well, so one of the things right now is I'm alone in the house and whatnot. So I have all the animals just here chilling with me on my bed and whatnot. And that always just gives me joy, because they used to be where they'd all roam around the house. And the more that I've been streaming and hanging out here, they've just decided that they'll chill on my bed. They'll sleep here. They'll nap. And I just love that. I love my pets.
Yeah, my cat has been more snugly, I guess, attached to me in the past few days. I think since my partner went out of town, right away, he was right up on me. And any chance I'm walking around the house, he's begging for attention. Very cute lately. My joy today, I woke up, I was feeling a little tired this morning, but of course after my coffee I felt great, and I was peeking around some streams, and I found this streamer, the Gaming NP, and just her her entire like vibe, and she was just like laughing and joyous, and she had so much energy, and I just like found myself, I generally have pretty hard time focusing and like staying in a stream for too long. I'll switch up streamers quite often. But I just like found myself there chatting with her for like an hour or so, and I really just enjoyed it. It was like just a joyful conversation. Yeah. Yeah, it was just a good morning. It brought like, the brightness to my morning, I think that maybe I needed this morning.
Yeah, that's great. I have a really hard time going out and finding new streamers to follow and whatnot. It's something I'm bad at.
Mhm.
I'm very much someone who will go back to my friends' chats because I know I can just hang out with them forever and keep them up in the background. Because streaming, or at least watching streams for me, is more of a passive thing. It's fun to be able to chat with new people and whatnot, but normally I just have them on while I'm doing other work.
Mhm.
So it's not as much of an active thing where I'm like, oh, well, let me go hunt around here, see if, about this new game I wanted to play and see who's streaming it and whatnot. It's not something that really comes to my mind.
Yeah. I found that difficult as well. I think just like talking to new every time I'm talking to a new person, it's always, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of anxiety that goes along with it. Maybe there's I don't know, just some like social, like just the basic social anxieties, but yeah, I felt nice. I gave it a chance this morning, and it went really well. Sometimes, you go into a new stream and it's not like the energy you're after for doing just that, like listening in the background, but
Mhm.
it felt good to just like click and nail it, and then I was like good for my morning. Chatting here and there, listening to her story. She was really open, so that's nice. I enjoy like people who are always open to share their experiences.
Absolutely.
Our joy of the day out of the way, what in life brings you pure joy?
Well, what we're going to be talking about today is going to be RPGs, and specifically tabletop RPGs. And this is something that's been a big part of my life for a very long time. It started when I was like 7, essentially, with my dad getting me and my sister to play D&D, and my mom getting roped in because she's like, "Well, this is family time. I guess we're going to play with stuff for family time." And so ever since then, I've really enjoyed the format of that collective storytelling and the improv that goes into it. And I think that all goes down to just loving reading, loving stories. I learned to read for Pokemon. I have the Pokemon guide that I learned to read in the background over here as well. Like it's always been that idea of adventure, that idea of exploration, and being able to share that with other people, especially people close to you. It can be fun to do, adventures with random people you meet at like, a Comic-Con or whatever. But being able to share those stories with your friends, it's just something that always has brought me joy. And the longer I did it, the more I was willing to take the, driver's seat in that, become the DM, tell the story, get everyone to share those things together, and to go through a little bit of self-discovery and exploration on their own. And I just think that is what really brings me joy, is just for people to be able to find those moments and discover something new about themselves that you can't necessarily do in the real world.
Yeah. I mean, just playing the concept of like tabletop role playing games and there being anything goes, and generally we take place in like a higher fantasy setting. So we're
Mhm.
talking like things just we could never touch upon or do or think about, like the magic and the just all of the general world flow is so different in
Mhm.
90% of tabletop role playing games that are like, campaigns that are kind of created. So there's just not, yeah, like you said, a chance for us to get any of those opportunities to see what we would do. And a lot of times, even when we're playing characters, I think in these tabletop role playing games, a lot of the decisions come down to our own lens on the situation, right? Like it's
Mhm.
you can only go so far in role playing a character to an extent. Sometimes, like, unless you say out loud, like, well, this is what my character would do, and then you do the thing. Like, I find oftentimes that I'm making decisions that only make sense to me as the player, as like M playing this character, which lends to
And
helping me
that's a
learn. Yeah.
point a lot of people start from, is just that stance of like, okay, well, this is what I would do, and this still makes most sense, so I'm going to do it. Okay, my character might not do this because it wouldn't make sense for them. Maybe I won't do that. This would make more sense for them.
Yeah.
It's that slow little build up for it. As someone with a really strong acting and theater background, it's a lot easier for me to put myself into someone else's shoes. And that's a skill that I see lacking in a lot of people. I work in customer service. I do coffee. So I see this all the time, both with the customers that come through and with my coworkers, because we all very much get caught up in our own narrative and wanting that to be the most true, the most accurate thing. And being able to share in collective storytelling means you get to watch other people take themselves outside of their narrative, and at the same time helps you to do the same thing.
Yeah, I find myself thinking in the same fashion quite often, is that like I know that people are living in their own truth and their own like what they know to be I just like factual about their space for the moment. And if that
I mean,
means that they're
seeing is
upset,
believing.
right? If that means that they're emotional for the moment, then that is truth for them. Like they've been facing things that
Mhm.
causes them to be that way. And sometimes you can be a bit affronted by a large show of emotions, but taking a moment to recognize the like just like nature of that, like you face that, they are facing that now. So if we could just be a bit of understanding in this moment, it could help that. And to tie that back into the joy, like you like D&D and tabletop role playing games give you the opportunity to get so many more examples of that kind of at like rapid fire pace to really expose
Mhm.
you to it. Yeah. So what about we've talked about it a little bit, but what about, do you think, like is it the feeling of nostalgia, the feeling of creativity? What keeps you coming back to like tabletop role playing games for 20 years?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is the creativity. I've jumped around through a lot of different systems. D&D was where I started, but the Star Wars Saga Edition and the 3.5 version, I've played a bit of that. There's a 5th edition version that I've looked into and haven't gotten a group together for. There's all the D20 modern stuff. There's Palladium games, which if you've I don't know how much you know about Palladium as a series, but they are pretty much a giant mishmash of every genre you can.
Okay.
But they also have a lot of like source books that go outside of that. One of my favorite for them is the Dead Rising campaign setting, which is just a zombie apocalypse. Everything zombie apocalypse. So that was really big, like a decade ago. We were trying to get people to play for. I've done Legend of the Five Rings. I've done Traveler. A little bit of Call of Cthulhu here and there. And every place has their own narrative that they want to impart and
Right.
that they want to tell. And I love that from a DM side and from an acting side, because it's all about setting up the themes that they want you to explore and go into.
Yeah.
And for me as a writer, I love that because it just gives me new ideas to go off of and riff with. I love being able to create things together. I actually had about a 5-year partnership with a couple of people where we were making a whole world together. I don't think that's ever going to get published because we had a bit of a falling out. But it was so much fun for me because I'd get to take things that they made, be able to tweak it just that little bit to push it a little bit further, and we'd be able to do that back and forth for hours. Sometimes we'd just be sitting there smoking and writing for like 8 hours at a time, having just so much fun because it's that pure creativity which you're limited by in other mediums.
It's true.
Once a TV show is done, you can enjoy it. You can write your fanfic. You can be speculative about it, but it is concrete. It is done.
Yeah.
And to the same extent, that's how video games work. There are only so many options that they've actually left on the table. That's why stuff like a Fallout, which does have many tabletop iterations of. I actually made a Powered by the Apocalypse Fallout game that I was playing with my friends for a little bit, and I absolutely love that because the lore is just all over the place there. But even with all those choices, you're still limited by what they allow you to do. that's why, New Vegas will always be one of my favorite games, because you had so many more options on how to interact with people. And why, the transition to Fallout 4 was really such a jarring thing, because I went from being able to, have 8 different options when talking to somebody and getting new information out of them to, well, do you want to hit up, left, right, or down? That's what you get. Good luck. Hope you can say everything you want with this vague descriptor.
And that's like
And so,
the benefit of these tabletop role-playing games, right? Oops, knocked my whole thing. Now it's shining me in the eyes. Is that those options become infinitum. You can like,
yeah, exactly.
Up, down, left, right, inside, outside, around.
You can give a flowery speech if you want. I've had players prepare poetry before for a session, which I loved that. That was so cool. Like, there's all these little bits and pieces that people can find more expression through with tabletop RPGs, and be able to share that with the people there. You have people who paint minis because they really love to get that sort of character representation in their hand, to be like, yes, this is me. See, that's who I'm playing. And then they'll do one for everyone at the table. You have people who just draw their OCs, and doing that makes them identify so much more with who their character is, because they can see that look like, yeah, my character is smirking all the time. You better know it. And then you'll have the people like me, this is something I'm guilty of, who will write a 10-page background, backstory, climactic hero's journey that ends with them losing all their power and whatnot. Like, yeah, that's for their first level. Yeah, they know things, but they've also forgotten a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to be able to frame, like, when you're playing these tabletop role-playing games, like, be able to frame everything properly, allow, like, your players, I guess from the GM point of view, to allow your players to sort of have that open-ended creativity, and then use your own creativity to tie it all together in a sweet bow for the start of the story for them.
It's exactly that, it's giving everybody the freedom to do so, which is something, a lot of people are kind of hesitant to do in creative spheres. Coming from the arts, it's something you see with a lot of people more technically minded, is that they're very much based and rooted in reality. And because of that, they aren't willing to let themselves feel all the joy of childhood that they got when they can just, make up whatever and say whatever and find things to be true to them, even though they're clearly not true.
Sort of an unrestricted freedom.
And I think that sort of childlike joy is something that's really hard to find the more as you grow up, because you do have so much more weighing on you, so much more that you've got to consider with everything you do. And that sort of analysis paralysis does hold back a lot of people, myself included, at times. But being able to go back to just a simple time where, everyone's a character in some land far, far away, and, everything that's affecting them is just what's right around them. It lets you let go. It is that sort of escapism that can let you enjoy life more for what you found there, and be able to bring it forward with you as your own person.
Yeah, I mean, that like kind of mentioned, it's that unrestricted freedom to just do whatever you want and live in whatever space that you have for the moment to inhabit. Like, if I'm thinking about like role-playing games and tabletop role-playing games, like, I love some jokes, but I like a good serious story that we can dive down into and dig apart. But I've had like some of my best role-playing experiences are things that, like, maybe we would consider a one shot, even if they go 10 sessions, and they're like playing the JoJo's tabletop role playing game. Like, it's just a laugh. Like, it's just a laugh and a riot. And like, you can't, like, it may be a serious, half serious story, but you can't take it seriously because it's a soap opera. Like, you're playing a soap opera, an anime soap opera. And, that's like the fun of it. Is like, sometimes I'm playing D&D and fantasy and I'm seriously looking for clues, and other times I'm like playing JoJo's and we're like laughing at the wildest situations that could happen because you're in an anime soap opera. And it's,
or you're playing the Wendy's adventure. Like, there's so many silly and like just offbeat campaigns that are out there, or one shots that are out there. I like the Weeby Goblin series that Pathfinder did for Free RPG Day for, like, I don't know, half a decade, maybe longer.
Oh.
I don't know. I lost count after 5. But they were just supposed to be these dumb little adventures where everyone's playing a goblin. You're probably gonna die, and it's written in there like, oh well, if somebody dies, another goblin looks just like them and has the same name. It just shows up because they're goblins. They're too dumb to not have the same names. Hey, that was your hero. They died. Now you're the hero.
Now you're the hero.
Like I love that sort of stuff, and it is just an absolute riot.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the most mortifying, but also one of the funniest moments that ever happened as a DM was I was playing a Star Wars campaign with just my family, and my mom was playing a Zeltron, which in Star Wars is this race of pink humanoids. They give off pheromones that make pretty much every other race attracted to them or species. And so my mom decided she was going to play this up, and she was going to start flirting with the random NPCs.
At least in that
and
case, your dad
old,
is the GM, I imagine.
16-year-old Crin.
Oh no, it's Crin the GM.
I was the GM.
Oh no,
Crin was the GM. No. And so my dad is on the side just laughing, having a ball with this, and my mom is just doing like the lightest sort of stuff to be like, oh well, I'm just gonna saddle up to him and see what I can do. And I'm like, oh,
I can't flirt with my mom.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I was like, they give in, or they run away. They don't know. They've heard of Zeltrons. They don't like it. They don't want your pheromones. They're out of here.
That
it was so funny and so mortifying for a young DM to figure out to do.
Flirting is the hardest thing to do in role-playing games, I swear. Like, I've never done it comfortably in a role-playing game, and I don't know what it is, but the moment I try, I get way more awkward than I even do in real life if I'm trying to flirt. It's like wild. And most of the time, I mean, it's my friends and we're just like goofing around, but like the moment I try, it's like I lose everything in what I'm trying to do. I can only imagine attempting to flirt with my mom while I'm DMing.
Yeah, there was no attempt. There was just complete mental shutdown. I think after that, I was ready to flirt with literally any of my other players. I'm like, oh, you're gonna throw this at me? I've had my fucking mom come for me. I'm ready to fight. Don't you dare.
I'm ready to fight. That's funny. So besides the occasional awkward moment, what are some challenges that you may be faced with like playing tabletop role-playing games, getting as like the ultimate creative freedom? What are some challenges that you come across?
Yeah, the biggest challenge that I come across is getting the group together. I think every D&D nerd knows the trouble of
scheduling
conflict. Yes, truly the biggest boss to ever fight any campaign, any adventure.
200%, no doubt.
Trying to get 6 people together, trying to get 8 people together, it's just it gets so hard. No one has free time. Everyone's trying to work their job or 3, raise their kids, start up their side hustle. All of us streaming, it's such a pain.
I mean,
trying to get people scheduled together. And the problem with that, the bigger problem with that, is the people who are going to make the time for the session are usually the people who already know how to play and really enjoy playing. But you need those newer people because you want them to enjoy this. You want to share this with them. You need them to come. You need them to commit. Because until you do, you can't teach them. You can't show them, the joy that you can find here, the release that can be there for just letting go of the rest of the world for a little bit. And that's especially harder with IRL groups. Getting everyone to the same spot can also be hard, just from commuting times and getting off work and whatnot. And for those, I really do like to have smaller groups. That's actually what my current work is going towards, is making a game that's more focused on 2 players.
I love a 2-player group.
I very much enjoy that. I think that you can just have the 2 players really bouncing off each other, getting a good little rhythm going, and then you as the DM can just present them challenges as they buddy cop their way through the world. but it's supposed to be more based around that and more around immersion. There's a lot of immersive sims is the genre that they're called in video games, for stuff like System Shock and Prey, and to a much lesser extent stuff like Fallout once you add in the survival modes for them. And that's really what I'm trying to accomplish here, is to give it much more of a rooting for you in what in real life. You got to eat. That's your motivation. You've been out on the road for a week. You ran out of food. You haven't been to hunt anything. You're just happy to get in town, and that's why you're going to the tavern. You're fucking hungry.
You're hungry.
Like, it's stuff like that I think is really important to get people invested first, and then they can start seeing more what their options are, where they can take it from there. Oh, I'm hungry. This random goblin that I'm fighting probably doesn't want to fight me. He's probably trying to rob me because he's hungry. Hey, dude, have a trail ration. Leave me the fuck alone. Like, that's the character sort of stuff that I want to see, because combat is such a heavy focus of the rule system. You'll find pretty much every character class in any RPG is going to be centered around combat and how they can kill other people. And at the end of the day, that's really messed up. Like, that's the really messed up part. It's just like murder everywhere. That's why it's the term murder hobo.
I mean,
for characters who just do that.
Of the D&D things, there are two things that are the most, I feel, like two actions you can take that are the most opposed to what you do in normal life. One is magic, like just casting a fireball. That's, I feel, fireball, yes, is a powerful spell, but people also love fireball because, like, just being able to do that is never something you could do in real life. And
incredible.
When you think of magic, I feel like producing fire is the first thing people think of, in a lot of cases. And the other thing is murder. Like, you can't go, I can't murder someone. Wouldn't want to, well, I hate that. I hate it. But in D&D, when that weird weight is lifted and I feel empowered by my magic and whatever, the option's on the table. And then it feels like, why shouldn't I murder this guy? That's why in the past few years, I've been trying to play better, more well-rounded characters. Like, I'm much more into the talking, the social game. When you start D&D, it's about combat. You gotta, I feel like I
get it.
Bring them in with a fight. You can't fight in real life. Come fight here. But then also talk here, like chat with us. Do a mystery. Scheduling is difficult. Scheduling is very hard. Yeah. Like, I mean, we've noticed we did one
session.
We did one session.
Hell and I.
And I mean, it was pitched as a one shot. I did think it might be a one shot. And as we kept playing, I was like, okay, maybe 2 sessions. No big deal. We'll pick it back up. We're not like focused on a schedule. And I think that I'm less focused on pushing us to play because we're all well versed in RPGs, right? Like you said, when I'm pushing for a schedule more often, there's some reasons behind it, or because I really want this new player to like get into it. Once you get the scheduling aspect down, the hardest hurdle to playing RPGs for a long period of time, you feel more free to just like start a game. We'll come back to it in a few months. We're all well versed enough to be like, and this is where we left off. We were playing some goblins, and let's have fun. And
here are the notes. You guys got a bell.
Exactly. Like it's there's a flow to it, and new characters, you kind of want to remind them more often and play with them a little bit more often so they're reminded of the joys of this. One of my D&D groups is with a brand new, it's his first time playing, and so like I find myself pushing for that more often because I'm just like, I want to see his responses to what's going on rather than like, I love an experienced response, of course, but an experienced response always comes with like, and next time maybe we do some, blank, blank, and blank, which I love. Criticism is good. But from like a new person, they can't fully criticize. They're just like, that was so cool. I've never done anything like that before. And I'm like, yeah, I know. You're welcome. Like, let's do it. This is great.
No, and that is such a wonderful feeling. It's something I've gotten many times over my life. I got, my old theater group, a good dozen of them playing D&D. Some still play it today. Some don't anymore. but like I got a bunch of them to do it. I got people at my college to do it. I've gotten people at my new job to do it. Like people really enjoy giving it a try, and they can see what's fun about it. But you can also see when it's like, okay, yeah, I had fun with it, but I don't really care if I ever do it again. And that's totally fine. That just means that they're not going to be the person that you're reaching out for as much. You're like, oh, hey, let's do this. That's the person you go to. Hey, I've got a really dumb single night adventure for us to play. And you can be this character where you can do that dumb shit you loved last time to the nth degree.
Single night adventure. So rare. So
Yeah,
rare. My pitch,
rare.
I really, to give context to the thing I'm about to say, we're talking about doing a little like one-off domains thing. I do for the Dungeons, Drive-Ins, and Dice podcast. I do think maybe 4 hours, but I think that with a structured approach to it in creating a D&D world, to give context, where the concept is to create a D&D world or a playable space in a session, maybe 2 hours. Build those characters that live there, and then play a small session that, even if it lands on a cliffhanger, that's okay, because we are conceptually coming into this with the idea we're not coming back to play this again. Even if these characters' lives still technically continue in fiction. So if they're on a cliffhanger, that's totally fine. It doesn't have to come to a conclusion. If it does, yay. If it doesn't, like, that's fun too. I don't know. I think it's doable. I think I gotta refine the structure and the approach.
I think how that sort of format's going to go really well is if you have like 3 people who are normally doing it, and then you have like a guest who comes in every time is like their 4th. So you have the people who are kind of used to creating together. You have that last person they're always kind of asking like, hey, what would you want to do here? This is the sort of stuff we like doing with it. And then you can like get more of that practice bit down to make sure you can fit those 2 hours of creation in, and then get to the adventure.
That does feel important for that, because that I do agree that's the biggest hurdle to this kind of project, is like getting a creative flow down with a group is very important. And the first time you sit down to do something like this is going to take a little bit longer for sure, because we're still trying to figure out how we create together. But if we have that group, 3 people that do it every time, and then include a guest or even 2 just on to help pitch new things and join in this creation, that might really help structure it and bolster it and allow it to be 3 hours or 4 hours of a recording. That's interesting. That's a really good idea. Yeah.
And like, we haven't even talked about the world building part of it for me as well, just for TTRPGs. World building is such a huge part of it. You like, when you go around online and you're looking at all these D&D podcasts and whatnot that are out there, pretty much every one of them is using some sort of homebrew setting, homebrew rules, things that they've cooked up on their own. They're like, oh, this is the way, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be awesome. And like, there's so much fun in that. There's so much freedom in that, because yes, you have like the basis of what you're trying to build next to. Right now, it's all 5th edition stuff. We'll see how that changes with the open game licensing changes that D&D is trying to push forward with D&D 1. But
I'm gonna play D&D. I'm gonna play D&D on my own, doing whatever I want to do with it. I just don't have to pull it off offline.
I've got so much 3.5 stuff back here. Like,
I don't care about your stupid license wizards. I have all your books. Take them away from me. Dare you to try.
But no, that like being able to sit down and for one person to go, well, I think in this setting, gnomes are the master race. They're the ones who have controlled everybody. They've enslaved everybody, and they're the bad guys this time. Gnomes are bad. And then you just go, okay, I'm sorry, that's a little anti-Semitic. Can we not do that? Can we please not?
That's been a focus for sure, like not picking a race as a bad guy, but a group of people.
And that's one of those things that like people go to initially. You see that with a lot of like Forgotten Realms design elements. Orcs are bad. Drow are bad.
Yeah.
You're telling me the black elves are the bad ones?
What are you saying, wizards? What are you saying, wizards?
Guys,
come on, man.
It's so bad.
Nope. My first character was a drow. I was like, not that.
But as you push further into a much more modern settings, Eberron did this a lot better, where it was very much more about the political focus of things, and that's what I focus on, is the socio-political conflicts that arise from the campaign settings that you're building. You'll see that a lot more in Pathfinder as well, in their Galarion setting, where it's all about the nations. Everywhere there's like 70 nations or something. Each one has its own splat book going into like why they hate everybody else or the people around them and whatnot. And that's where you find so much more exploration, because you're no longer putting it to like the basis that Wizards has kind of pushed for so long, because it was rooted out of the 50s and a lot of the racism that comes out of the United States. And nowadays, being able to include trans characters, that was such a huge thing in the Wrath of the Righteous campaign for Pathfinder. Was one of their main characters was trans, and it was never really talked about unless you talked to her and her love interest. And like that was such a big thing for me to find, and to find ace characters out there and whatnot. Like, I did a lot of discovery about myself as an asexual person by playing a Warforged in my college campaign. That was before I even knew the term ace. But I wanted to play a character. This is a character I wrote 10 pages of backstory for,
Yes,
and sent to my DM, who I didn't know at all. This was a complete Skype group.
amazing.
So we
a stranger. Here's 10 pages.
Together. Yeah, no. Oh, Jasper, thank you for putting up with me. But like we got together on a looking for group Tumblr that existed back in the day. I don't know, it might still be running. I don't know what Tumblr's doing anymore. And none of us really knew each other. Maybe living. I don't know. Twitter might
just
be dying.
Barely living. Yeah. I guess they're all dying.
Well, in the Sylvia Plath sense of the word, we're all dying.
Yeah, right.
But that was such a great way for me to explore that, because everyone else was making more of these bonds between themselves and the characters they were rescuing and whatnot, and I got to be just this really stoic figure who's like, well, that is the right thing to do. Yeah, that's probably the greater good. I can get that, but at the same time, I could be like, I don't. What this person's not going to seduce me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm rock.
I'm rock. I feel like from my beginning in D&D, I was immediately impressed with my DM. Just like being given the options I was given, and the way that he thought about what these NPCs were feeling really like opened me up to like trying that out. It really inspired me. I think there was maybe a few different arcs I played there, and then I immediately like dove into attempting. I was like, hey, would you mind joining? Maybe we switch things around. Maybe I DM, that way I have you here, help me out, tell me what what I can do better as we're going. And since then, it's like everything is homebrewed. I think even my first one was homebrewed. I just like, sometimes I'll open a module, and the moment I find inspiration, I'm like, ooh, this would be a good idea. Closed. And I'm like, and here we go. It's creation time. The whole world I got to build up. This ocean is called this, and these people control it, and these other people don't like that. And then I'm like, here, build some characters in here. Here's like a whole little set. And what do you guys want to do? And that's like the fun thing for me, is that like, I mean, I guess it's back to the creating as a group. Like the group think that kind of begins to happen is that as you get a little better at it, you start to include that. Like, this person's backstory says that this thing exists, so I can tie that in over here and mix it all together so that my world is complete, and I didn't have to add in every single detail. They added in some, I added in some, and they blended.
One of my favorite DM tricks is taking something somebody says offhandedly and then working it into the plot.
I had one of my characters said, I said, yeah, they're selling like hotcakes. And they said, I don't know what hotcakes are, but I'll buy it. And then we had a whole conversation about what hotcakes are. And I pointed out a new shop that sells hotcakes. And like, we didn't do anything with it, but it gave us another few minutes of just like interacting about this dumb comment that we made and kept making.
No, and that's the sort of thing I adore because yeah, it's when you as the DM are just going, and then one of the characters catches you, and they're like, "Wait, is that a thing?" And you're like, "It is now." So yeah, we're gonna go all into it. Yes, and
Yes, and indeed. Yes, and indeed. That has been my newest focus in D&D is I used to, and it was one of my players pointed it out to me. I used to think like, why would what is in place for me to say yes? How can I in canon say yes to the thing you're asking? And if I can't
Mhm.
figure out what's there to make that happen, I'm like, well, I don't see how that could happen. But new frame is why shouldn't it? Why can't it happen? Is there anything I can all of a sudden put there to make that doable because it can fit or make sense because there's no reason for me to say no. Unless it's
Yeah,
so ridiculously, away from story. But then that's your job as the DM to like
wrangle.
wrangle that and frame it just right. So yeah, my new thing is like why shouldn't it? Why shouldn't it happen? To really lean into the yes
Yeah,
and yeah.
and I can definitely respect that. That's one of those traits as a DM. Like, there's a lot of different styles of GMing or DMing. You have the people who are completely just off the book. That's a lot of new people at first. They're just
Hmm.
taking what they've been given because they don't know what they can improvise. It's not going to break everything that's already been set up.
Hmm.
And a lot of games are actually set up pretty loosely in that sense because they know there's going to be improv to let you kind of break them as you go. But that's how a lot of people start, and then slowly over time you get people who develop who are like, oh well, I'm just gonna improvise everything. This entire session is gonna be completely improvised. you
Hmm.
you guys do whatever you want. I'll let you know what happens. Good luck. I don't know it's always going to be good, but it's going to happen. And then I'm much more of a bullet pointer. I have the stuff that I want to hit. I have a base idea of what's around, and then I'll go from there. But I also lean into like this super heavy lore design where like I have pages and pages and pages of stuff written up, so that way I can always go back to it. But I'm also willing to drop literally all of
All of
it
it
at a
right away.
moment's
Yep.
notice because I'm like, well, I said one thing wrong when I was talking to you, so that invalidated like 3 paragraphs of work.
Oh,
Oh
that's
well, I
yeah,
guess I'll
that's the
change it.
worst, the biggest weight. You're like, oh, I cannot believe I didn't say the one important sentence. I gave you guys everything, but not the clue, not the clue, and it's over. I can't retcon a clue. He also
Yeah.
said the clue. Like, no.
He also said the most obvious clue imaginable. Just imagine that was about halfway through everything.
Gosh, just the one clue I'm always thinking about. I'm like, and this is the one thing I have to say, and it's the one thing that doesn't come up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like for me, that's just fun. It
Mhm.
keeps me on my toes. The thing that really kills D&D and TTRPGs for me is when I'm playing through it and I know everything that's going to happen. Like I
Yeah.
hate that. I can go through a pre-made module, but I can't say I know everything's going to happen unless you guys follow it exactly to the detail. And I don't expect that. I never expect that. No
Mhm.
one I've ever played has been such a rote player that they always go through and do everything the way I think it's going to happen.
Right.
I've had some
Never.
uninspired sessions where people don't really get off the beaten path. They only know how to do two things: that's check for traps and fight stuff, and that's okay. It's just not that interesting to me. And that's when I'm like, all right, well, there's no traps. You fight this gelatinous cube and you move on with your day. What does your character feel about this?
Yeah, how do you feel? I feel like there's a good way that the D&D book puts it, and that is that like the types of players you have kind of fall into different categories, and that is that some are here for lore, some are here for fighting, some are here for high fantasy, and some are here to just hang out with a group of people. And it's important to know what your players are. Like I think I have in my one of my current groups, like everyone is a different category of player. And so it's important to make sure that at some point I can trigger each of their wants in a session or in an encounter.
Yes.
Give them a fighting opportunity, give them a moment to possibly get past it if they do their research right and can now charisma past it or, investigate their way out of it or whatever that is.
And
And
I think a big part of that is also helping people to choose classes that are going to let them function in the way they like to play.
yeah, that's important too.
Because when I have new characters coming through, I typically I don't make them spellcasters. That's a lot to know and understand and rules to check through. I let them play rogues. I let them be little scoundrels running around doing little thievy things. They pickpocket every merchant in town. Whatever, that's fine. They'll learn not to do that once the guard comes. But
Once you get
that's just part
arrested,
of consequentialism. Yeah. Now it's kind of the whole party's
you can
problem. We
murder,
made
but
it
hey,
that
the
way.
law exists here too. And the reason you shouldn't
Yeah.
murder still exists.
Yeah, that's still like a basic truth. Yeah, I know we're out in the boonies, so you can probably get away with it a bit more, but like
Don't do it because you can get away with it.
Yeah, you're playing a paladin. See how this is lawful good? Yeah. Oh.
Tabletop role-playing games, they hold a big part in your life. It seems that they have for a long period of time, right? How do you think that just being like RPG game focused has maybe affected your life outside of even just playing D&D, like in your day-to-day when you think about how you interact with people or how you go about that? Do you think that this has affected you in any way there?
Oh, definitely. That is such a broad and open-ended question, and unfortunately, like the answer is it's affecting me all over the place. I'm constantly thinking about stuff in terms of morality and in terms of how we can approach things differently, and it's given me a huge amount of empathy over the course of my life. Now, I'm not saying that's like the only thing that has done so, but it's definitely something that's helped me and to try and look at things from other people's point of views. It's definitely gotten to that point where I can kind of predict how people act and react in certain situations because I've seen it before through through other games, through analyzing how other people assume these sorts of things happen. Like there's tons of dumb little scales in RPGs, like, oh well, this is how people go from hostile to unfriendly to indifferent, and like I can measure that out when I'm talking with somebody, be like, oh yeah, you're not really liking what I'm saying.
They're at the
Well, I
indifferent
can
level
put
right
on
now.
some more. I can put on some more honeyed words here. I know how to do that.
Not quite
I'll turn up the
hostile,
charm.
but we're at indifference, definitely.
Like I can recognize how that stuff kind of plays out in real time, so to speak, and that's fine. It's definitely something that affected my worldview a lot more when I was younger. Just because when you're hyper fixated on something, it becomes everything that your brain is thinking about and comprehending and putting together in all these different manners. And that was definitely something I kind of broke out of. It's actually one of the reasons I don't wear a watch. I used to wear a watch when I was younger, and my life was ruled by time. And if you know how combat works in RPGs, it's all ruled by time.
6 seconds, baby.
6 seconds. Gotta do it all right then, right now. And like for a long time, that's how I kind of recognized it. I'm like, oh well, how much time am I wasting by doing this? Oh, I'm wasting minutes. This is my spells going down for the day. This is me wasting the bonuses that I have right now because I'm just not using them well. And God, that was anxiety inducing.
I was gonna say that feels like anxious.
It was bad. It was really bad. And so it's not that there aren't useful things you can get from that. It's just everything has to be taken with a pinch of salt, a grain of moderation. I think the most important stuff you can take from D&D and other RPGs is the social aspects of it more than anything else. How you interact with people, how you talk with them, how you think about what they're doing and why they're doing things. Those are all the sort of problem solving skills that aren't really taught, so to speak, in school. It's stuff you learn on the playground through your friend groups, maybe.
That's a good point.
Then,
yeah,
it's not really like a heavy emphasis a lot of the time. Most of the time, for kids, at least that I knew, we were all incentivized to do the gifted kid stuff where you're reading more, you're pushing yourself further, you're doing homework on lunch breaks because you don't have time to do it the rest of the time. And so you lose out on a lot of that. But the more that you do think about it, the more that you push yourself to be more socially conscious, I think the better off your life typically is. And
Yeah.
that's just one of those little things that where your imagination really comes into work a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start playing D&D until college, but I mean, even
Hmm.
still, I would totally agree. It's like a fast track for large amounts of experience because I mean, even in a session, say a 4-hour session of D&D, we go through so many small interactions about what would I do in this one tiny moment, that it's just like a fast track to gaining experience on experience on experience on experience. And when you play, I feel like when you play D&D, it registers more as like actual an experience rather than when you go about your life. Like when you go about your life and you know,
Hmm.
pick up something, you fill your bottle, you do X, Y, and Z before you go to work, like that is habit. And you're not thinking about the experience of doing this because it's like muscle memory. It's the thing you do.
Yeah,
And while
it's
this
the
may be,
norm.
it's the norm. And while this may be muscle memory for your character, they won't think about having picked up this item. Um,
Hmm.
it's a new experience for you having done it or been a part of it or talked to this person in this way or been faced with stealing something. Maybe you've never stolen and now you have to deal with that situation. And it's just another fast track to
Honestly,
learning a new.
that is such a cool thing to see for someone, especially someone who's like been a goody two shoes their entire life, is getting them to steal something for the first time. That it really does hit them. Like you can see that just go through them. Like, wow, I I've never stolen before. A lot of times you get that little shoulder shrug of like, that's weird.
That's
But
weird.
you can see somebody grow in that moment, and I love that.
You can
I love that
actually
shit.
see the experience register on them. And
Hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of cases in D&D where I've seen that kind of that feeling, whether that like you're royalty for the first time and you get treated like it and you're like, "Whoa.
Hmm.
That's what it feels like to be respected by everyone I walk around. That's cool." Stealing, like that's always a good option. I still feel like people don't think about the murder. They do the murder and they're like, "I did it." Not that
No,
I mean
no,
you
they
don't want that to
don't.
weigh on you.
Well, okay. This is one of the things that, like, as a DM for a smaller group, I would like to emphasize. I'm really trying to make the morale system matter more.
Mhm.
So the first time you kill somebody in session, yeah, your morale's going down. I'm sorry, that's gonna be something your character has to deal with and remember
Mhm. I've
because like,
definitely sorry. No. I was
well,
gonna say I've definitely
you're good,
like
you're good.
faced a player with that before, where like they came across an enemy or a thing that they weren't. It was like a big dog
Hmm.
creature, and they were like, "Cool, we're in a dungeon, so we're gonna murder it because it's right around the corner." And they popped out and they all casted perfect combo spells and killed the thing and blew it up. And then its friend came around the corner and was weeping that they had murdered their friend and like, "Don't! Why would you do this to my friend?" And like now you
Yeah.
have, and everyone in the session was like, what is this reaction? They're supposed to be mad and get aggressive. Why? You killed their friend. Why would they be
Why?
mad?
Yeah.
They're distraught.
Hmm. Hmm. And like that's such a difference in how RPGs have been made. I'll say is morale was something that was used to never be published anywhere. It would always be something like, oh well, this thing fights with death. This thing will fight you and then explode, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just so unrealistic. If I'm having a group of cutthroats trying to rob you, let me tell you, when one of them takes a gash that takes off half their hit points, they're gonna be like, guys, we need to get out of
This
here.
hurts real
And
bad.
like, we don't have any healing magic for this. This isn't something I can just get patched up. I'm gonna have to rest this off for the next week.
I'm a big fan of like massive damage bits as I've gone on. Like half health means something for your life. Like it means something for
Mhm.
you as a person. That's at least a scar. That's a limp. That's a missing finger. Like that's something big for you.
it's something I normally play into with how I run enemies is like once they hit half health, they take some sort of a debuff or modifier to their stats. Normally it's something simple like -1 to their ability scores or whatever. Just that way it's not getting bogged down in the minutia for it. And for bosses, it normally means that they switch their tactics up. It's that sort of understanding for the character that you as the DM's playing. You're piloting so many, you kind of have to do that rapid fire. But it's that understanding like, oh, I could die here. No.
No, there's a desperation that needs to come out.
A restrained combat. This is I am using everything at my disposal to annihilate you who have come into my lair. Like there's gonna be that sort of playfulness, that little superhero banter back and forth to start off. But at the end of the day, like people don't want to die. It's a very simple motivation, but literally everything you're fighting is going to have that unless they're a construct or an undead. And even then, they probably have some sense of self-preservation.
Yeah, I mean, it shows it. It shows it quite often. I think in D&D, like it is the weird bit about anime where you're like, well, if they had that much power all along, why wouldn't they just use it? And it's like because they didn't need to. Like in the beginning, why would they need to until they feel like they're fighting for their life, and now they have to give it their all. They're cornered, right? Everything is everything comes out more when you're cornered, and I mean, thinking about that in terms of just DMing and the enemies and the bosses you fight along the way is an intriguing tactic to maybe pull some moral choices out of your party too.
Oh yeah, having the last two enemies in a group surrender because they realize they're not going to win, that always throws people off. Like that sort of thing throws people so far off because like, well wait, how do we take them prisoner? Who do we turn them over to? How do we guarantee they're not just going to break out? It gives you that whole like Superman dilemma where Superman always throws the bad guys back in because he believes in second chances, but they always break out and go back to terrorizing the town. Like, is that going to happen here? Is there somewhere you rehabilitate them? Because I don't know. Do you follow a religion out around here that would take this guy in? How do we make sure that he doesn't cast something? This is a 9th level wizard. He could just annihilate anybody we put next to him with a disintegrate spell soon. Like, how are we going to actually meaningfully handle this? And that's part of world building a lot of the times, is making sure people know that there's a way to do this. And that in of itself creates so many new quests, a whole new journey that you have to go on. And along the way, maybe that character proves that they are worth redemption. Maybe the party decides that they're going to keep them with them and be their personal accountability partners because, now this NPC who was never supposed to survive, but was just in the right place at the right time, is now the 6th member in the group because everyone wants to see them get a better life.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of stuff that always gives me a little bit more hope, just in the world, in humanity, because you can watch, your friends actually, care about someone who hours ago, minutes ago, 2 rounds ago was
12 seconds ago. Yeah.
Yep.
12 seconds ago was trying to kill me, and now they are not.
And now maybe they're pretty good. We can use somebody like that on our team.
So we've talked about a lot of different aspects of tabletop role-playing games, of D&D, and I think sort of the mindset that comes with this. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you're a big fan of in this sphere? Specific games you love? I don't know, anything along those pages that you're like, we haven't chatted about that?
There's just so much to chat about on this topic. We could probably go for a whole other hour.
I mean, no doubt.
In all honesty. As far as particular games, I think if you really want to capture like just the pure joy of a tabletop RPG, you should look into Toon. Toon is a game where you're literally playing as a cartoon character. So you can do all the dumb, stretchy, like your arm goes all the way back like a quarter mile before it slams down on the strength meter. Like you can do whatever you want in that game as long as it's funny. And when something falls flat, literally your character falls flat. Like that's the joke. Is like, oh, that wasn't a funny bit. You fall over. You've become 2D again. You have failed.
That's funny. That's funny. That's
Like,
very approachable too, it seems, because cartoons are just like
it is.
knowledgeable for everyone.
And you can draw on whatever. You can play Bugs Bunny if you felt like it. You could be Wile E. Coyote. You could do as anime shit as you felt like. But I feel like Toon is a less talked about game because it's such a silly genre, but it's also something that's highly approachable, and it's something that you can play with kids and they will inherently get onto it. That's actually probably something that I'd want to talk about a little bit more is um, I have played D&D from a very young age, and I think it helped me a lot in a lot of different ways. And I think nowadays it's becoming more common. Before I left LA, I was actually helping one of my coworkers with getting herself and her kids set up to play because one of them was interested in it. And I think including their partner, there was 5 of them because they had 3 kids, and they were all gonna start playing. And during that time, I was doing a lot of research into kid-friendly modules and whatnot that's put up there. And I think that is really a key facet moving forward for TTRPGs is to make them something that kids can really enjoy, because it shows that the format can be used for a lot more than just stories about war, stories about tragedy, stories about death. There are murder mysteries out there, but murder, right in the name. There are political thrillers that go on, but a lot of the times when you're looking at RPGs, they're very heavy conflicts, very heavy topics that get brought up, and I think that is one of the things that hold a lot of people back from playing, is because they already deal with some facet of that in the real world. Like, I'm sorry, I do the best I can in my campaign settings to make racism a non-issue.
Me too.
It
I
is
do
not
as well.
something that I want my players to be walking into. It's the same thing with misogyny. I try to keep that as far off the table. If that pops up, it's because it's to signify this guy's an asshole.
This is bad. This is
guy
a
right
bad
here,
moment.
this is bad. And other people around him don't like the fact he's doing it either. But this is to really characterize that as a great evil. And we will not see this through most of the rest of the campaign. Because I want it to be a place where people can feel safe to explore. And you can't do that if you just bring in all of the horrors of the real world right behind you.
That's
and
very
I
true.
think that's important for kids as well.
That's very true. Definitely working on tailoring your content to your, I mean, both your players, or no, your players, because that is your audience for D&D.
Of course.
I was thinking about, I have, audience and players and etc. But your audience is your players for D&D, and you want to tailor it to like what they're after and what they want. And that's the joy of a good DM, is that when you have one and you're working together openly, you can get the story you want and still be challenged with ideas, and not be uncomfortable by that challenge. I put it, I think in our recent campaign, at the most I said it exists, but we just won't be touching on it. You can imagine that in the universe, because we're playing space and we're crossing the universe, that it exists. But I'm not going to be diving into it, right? We created like a invasive species committee, and then rather than talking about like people being jerks, it's only them do the this thing. So it's all sort of like coalesced. When I don't want it, we just don't bring them into it. And when I'm like, maybe it fits the situation. The invasive species committee is here. Oh no. But like you said, like it makes them the bad guy rather than making the world or the place like a bad place with people that are just doing it.
I think it's one of the reasons I really will probably never play Warhammer, is because it really puts up like the humans as basically a Nazi faction, and I can't have that. You can't be doing that.
All
shit.
of us? No, not me. Right.
Well, it's the Space Marines and everything.
That's a brutal story. One of my good friends is really into it, and every time there's like new stuff coming out, he's like, "This is happening," and we're always like, "I don't get it, but it's so intense."
It'll never be able to really get me into it because of that. And like it can be used for story purposes. Don't get me wrong, but
It's not what you're
But
after as a role
it's
player.
not what I think the medium should be used for.
Yeah.
There's enough of that out there. We don't need to bring it into our fantasy worlds like that, unless you're trying to make a really poignant and specific point about how it is wrong. But humans and Space Marines are like one of the most played factions in Warhammer, so clearly it didn't work.
Yeah. People are like, "Ooh, I'll play a human because I know that," and you're like, "But do you know that? But do you know
what that
that?"
means here? Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we're actually
it's
we're doing a Warhammer after our arc. We're doing a like a one-shot arc for Warhammer, and I'll definitely take that into account to not be a
well, it all
human.
depends whether you're playing like the fantasy setting where things are not quite as bad. Well, they're bad in other ways, or if you're playing 40k. 40k is where like the Space Marines and the classic Warhammer stuff that you've probably seen more of. That's more like the sci-fi stuff comes from.
I think we are doing 40k, but
okay,
you know, we're along for the ride. It's a one shot. We'll be past it. I'm looking. I mean, I at least am looking forward to. I do enjoy the differences of all of like the RPGs, and I've never played the Warhammer system, so I'm excited to like.
Sure.
I think goals, what D&D has led me to, is like one day I think I'd like to make my own tabletop role-playing game system.
Absolutely.
And so I love exploring new systems.
And it's a lot of work, but
No
there's
doubt.
so much good stuff to pull from everything that's been put out there. Like I'm always going out to try and find new RPGs. Like, oh, well, how do you do initiative? How do you do skills? How do you approach this?
What dice do you roll
right now? Yeah, what dice do you roll? Oh, yeah, like I've done pure D6 systems before. I've used percentile systems before. And like it's always just so interesting to get your grubby little fingers in there. I'm like, ooh, what dice do I roll today?
How can this work for me? Yeah, 100%, 100%. Well then, I think we're kind of wrapping up to a close here, nearing an end. Would you maybe summarize what this is for you, tabletop role-playing games, what it means for you, what it's meant to your wider life, sort of as a whole, as a good wrap-up?
Absolutely. You know, tabletop RPGs in a lot of ways is how I measure my life. You know, through the different games I've played, through the different systems I've explored, from being just a player to becoming a forever GM, as I'll call it when you're the one running every game. You know, it's opened up a lot as far as being more mindful of the people around me and furthering my acting skills, along with letting me combine a lot of the things I enjoy in life into one distinct package that I can share with my family and friends. You know, there are so many different aspects to TTRPGs. And while the math can be a bit restrictive for some, I absolutely love it. So that makes me a little bit of an outsider there. There's a lot more past that, and it doesn't have to be that important either. Being able to find your own creativity within it and be able to find the system that matches how you like to play and how you like to express yourself will honestly bring you a lot of joy in life if you find people who are willing to play or people who are willing to learn more about you. Sharing stories a lot of the time is very personal. You know, it's revealing a part of yourself that maybe you don't bring to your everyday life, and being able to find the right way to express that and to be able to show that to other people is such an uplifting and freeing feeling that I think that encapsulate what joy really is.
That is a great way to put it. I find that here, especially, I mean, on the podcast, on the PureJoy podcast, we're searching for sort of my own side quest. Is just like if someone didn't know what joy was, if I was like, would you like to be a guest? And they're like, I don't know what you mean by that. I would be like, okay, well, from my experience with it, this is sort of what encapsulates joy, as you've so aptly put. So that's fantastic.
I tried to wrap it back in, you know.
No, that was good. That's a great wrap in. That was a fantastic wrap in. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that we're gonna do some close up stuff here. And yeah, close out the episode. But I really appreciate you coming on out, making the time to join us here on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been Kring Cray. That's where you can find me on all the socials. If you want to talk to Em and I, you can find us on our Discord, the Legion. which is linked on both of our, I believe both of our Twitters, and has its own Twitter now. Otherwise, like I said, thank you for having me, and you have a wonderful rest of your day, Em.
Yeah, you too, Kryn. We'll talk to you later. As for everyone else, I want to thank you all for coming on out and joining on the 18th episode of the PureJoy podcast with my guest, Tristen Farley, or again, as many of we may know him, Kryn Crea. I always switch back and forth between those two, but it's Kryn. It's our boy Kryn. He, like we've just seen, has spent this episode talking about tabletop role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, the general creative freedom that brings him, and how that's opened him up in his wider life to new experiences, to new connections with people, to new understandings of the way that situations are going. I think that playing tabletop role-playing games is one of the best stretches you can do for your brain. It is a stretch for your creativity. It is a stretch for your personality development, for your basic understanding of human interaction. I think that it truly, as we may have mentioned throughout the podcast, kind of fast tracks your experiences, your social experiences in a way that your average life may not in general. I think that being open to the incredible, fully perfect creative freedom that it really does allow can be imposing, can be a little bit maybe frightening to look at and to say, like, I want to play D&D, but you can do anything you want. What do I do? And I'm kind of locked into this. It's start small, do small actions at a time, open yourself up to being able to do literally anything you want, and how that happens. And with experience, the actions will come. And I think that a lot of what we talked about is connectable across lots of joys, right? The sheer creativity, just being open to human experience and what other people are feeling is one of the biggest lessons I think we can pull out of this, or hopefully any other joy. I really appreciate all of you coming on out and joining on the 18th episode of the PureJoy podcast. I want to thank my guest, Tristen, for coming on out and being so open with us today. I want to thank MioWnize and Merda. They allow me to use their music in the edits of the podcast. We're talking intro, outro, the transitions. I really appreciate them. You can find them on Soundcloud, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Your music, you can find them. Kryn, you can find under Kryn Crea. I'm going to be back and forth on saying that, but it'll be down in the description below of the podcast and the video, where you can find him on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, there across the board. So definitely check out down there. Yeah. Time to close up here, though, folks. I, again, the third time in the closer, appreciate everyone coming on out. I thank you all for listening to this episode and other episodes of the PureJoy podcast. We will see you next time, folks.